Hello, this is Evan, the Get It Together Man. Today I'm going to show you how to build the 16 by 12 Barrington gazebo by Backyard Discovery. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know we tend to do things out of order from the instruction manual. So here I am getting ready to do steps 7 through 9, which is the crossbeam structure of the long side, the 16-foot side. Here's what it's going to look like when it's done. I'm making 2 of those. And my partner over there off camera, he's doing the same thing with the 12-foot side, which is steps 2 through 4 and 6 from the instruction manual. To set up my workstation here, I grabbed 2 cue boards, which are 1x6s basically. They're not used in this step. I just put them across the sawhorses so that I had a smooth surface to build the cross beams on. The pieces I'm actually using for this step are those 2x6 looking pieces, and they're all labeled with the letter D and a number. So at this point I'm done with those cue boards and I got rid of them, and now I'm spreading out the sawhorses because these pieces are 16 feet long to make the work surface a little bit more sturdy. Now I'm going to use, once I get the corbels on there, I'm going to use this as a work surface to build the roof panels. You'll see how I set that up in a minute. This has been my full-time job for over 5 years. And that whole time I've been a subcontractor through Sam's Club for their assembly services, and they sell a lot of Backyard Discovery stuff through that store. So we've built this product and similar ones many times. What I'm doing here is getting the border pieces for the roof panels prepped, and so is my helper there on the other side. He's getting his workstation set up the same as mine. On these boards here, you want to notice these offset holes. To keep yourself oriented, the holes that are offset are going to be facing down towards the inside of the gazebo when everything is said and done. So just in your mind, remember that that is down. Now this part here, these long side pieces are actually a compound board held together by a metal bracket and screws. So that's what I'm getting ready to do now. It's a little bit tricky getting the holes to line up and getting the board to stay straight. You'll see I had to fix one of the boards and straighten them. But here, and then there's the offset holes again. You want to make sure on the 2 boards you're putting together that the offset boards are facing the same way, and there's some diagonal holes. They need to be facing out as well. You can use the surface here, like I said, with the cross pieces on the sawhorses to have a nice flat work surface that's up off the ground. So there's one board. I think this next one here is the one that ends up being crooked. But there's the holes. You want to line them up, put the screw in there, and then flip it over. There's 6 screws on each board, and they go through that metal bracket. This second board here, when I set it by its neighbor, I noticed it wasn't straight, so I had to loosen some of the screws, take some of the screws out, try to get it to straighten itself out. So even when you get the pre-drilled holes lined up with the holes in the bracket, what's really important is that the board is straight. So that's what I was fixing there. And here's another issue that may come up. Even though you have pre-drilled holes, you may get a split like this. So to fix this, I'm getting some long screws, and I'm going to pre-drill some holes through the top of the board, which I want this long screw to come through the top of the board so you can't see it from inside the gazebo later. And you know it's the top of the board because those offset holes, like I said, are facing down. So drill through and drive your screw through the side opposite the offset holes. Now I'm setting up the diagonal sides of the roof panel, and I'm showing the offset holes here. Those need to be facing down. And here, this notch at the end, that goes towards the bottom or the wider side of the panel, and that needs to be facing out the outside of the panel. So that'll help you keep these boards oriented. When putting in these screws that hold the 2x4s or the E-boards on here, tip is to put the bottom one in first, but don't tighten it all the way so there's still a gap between the 2 boards. And then you can see to put the top one on to make sure it goes into the pre-drill hole, and then you can tighten them both. Now these cue boards go along the bottom of the roof panel. These are the same boards I used earlier across the sawhorses to make the work surface. Same trick here, put the bottom screw into the E-board first and leave a gap, and then line up the top one, and then tighten them both down. This measurement I'm doing at the corner is really key, and I'm going to show that in more detail for the second panel I do. And now to finish the wood part of the panel, I'm getting out the purlins or the H boards, and they each go into pre-drilled holes in the top of these 2x4s here. Here it looks like. And what I do is put one in the middle or in the joint, part way down, and then I go to the farthest end I can and put a screw in tight there, and then I can tighten all the rest of them without having to look and make sure the holes are lined up. As you do this, some of the 2x4s might be slightly warped, or the H boards might be warped. Just use this as an opportunity to try to get the holes to line up best you can. You might need to pull a 2x4 to the left or the right, but if you get these holes lined up, that's going to allow the metal to line up good later. Don't go off script and make your own holes here. Try to match up the pre-drilled holes best you can. Here I am lining up. I'm just looking down the diagonal here, and the ends of these H boards need to make a line like this. Every once in a while, one may be sticking out a little bit, and I'll show you how to handle that in the second panel, because that happened on this build. But that just may happen if an E board is warped, or just any variation. There's a lot of compound angles in these panels, so there is something you can do if one of those H boards is sticking out farther than it should. But in general, you want to have a nice straight line down that diagonal. I'm going to show in detail now this measurement here. You want to have something to measure. So the large panel and the small panel each have a different gap here. So in this case, it's about 3/4 of an inch. The way I do it is to put a mark on the top of the board here, and then look straight down and make sure that diagonal piece is flush with the bottom. So I'm feeling it with my finger there to make sure it's flush with the bottom, and looking straight down to make sure it's lined up with my mark. You can also measure it from the back of the board here and mark it with your pencil or something if that's easier for you. I think that's what my helper does. So this is how I do it. I mark it at the top, I get the screws ready to go, and then sometimes if there is warping or something's not lining up right, or if you're not on a completely flat surface, you might need to get a helper to push or pull to get that mark to go where it's supposed to go. And here we are, just blazing through, putting the purlins on this board, and I'll show you how, when one's not lined up right, what you can do about that. But first, we're going to peel all the blue film off of all the metal pieces. This sometimes is going to take like over an hour sometimes, so I'm just fast forwarding through that, but this is one of the most annoying parts about these builds, is getting all the blue film off. We like to just take a minute to get all the peeling done at once when we have the wooden frame built like this. When these metal pieces are lined up correctly, it's going to look like this. It's going to go right to the end of those H boards. There's not going to be any overlap. It's going to be completely flush. See here, when the metal comes down, it will actually be flush with the board. And that's what you want to see. There's not really much of an overhang at the bottom, unfortunately, on this, which is kind of a design flaw. It just flush all around pretty much at the bottom and at the end of these boards. But now here's the board that's sticking out too far. Everything else is lined up, and that one's out about 1/2 inch or 1/4 of an inch. And I'll show you what to do about that. Tack down the metal around this area with the roof screws so that the metal's not moving around, and then get a saw and just cut off the end of the board flush with where the metal is. It's easy enough. It even talks about this in the book, I think, because this is just happens sometimes. And then see, here's how flush it is with the bottom, and then you can go around and put the rest of the roof screws in. This part here, this track, needs to be all the way to the top, and then there's a little piece of track at the bottom that you put on there. I like to make sure there's at least 2 screws holding the track on at the bottom, because that's just one little piece there. These metal sheets are being held on by roof screws with a plastic washer, and when you tighten those down, you want to make sure that the screw is snug to the plastic washer, but not smashing it, just to make it snug so it makes a good watertight seal. And it's easy to tell where the screws are going because there's holes in the metal sheets, and they line up with those purlin H boards, and that's where the screws are attaching to. After you repeat the process, then we're going to reconfigure the work area to where we can set up the legs and the cross beams, and then it's going to actually start looking like a gazebo here in a minute. The first part with the roof pieces, that takes a few hours. That's the most tedious part. It goes pretty quick after this. Here I am working on the ridge cap. It has some of those compound boards that I made earlier, some T-nuts, and my helper over there is going to start working on the legs and the cross beams. These boards on the ridge cap follow the same rule of thumb as the other ones. There's some offset holes. Those need to be facing down. And there's some T-nuts, which you want to make sure they're facing the right way and in the right holes as well. Okay, now we're going back to the beginning of the book, putting the legs together and the cross beams. Our 4 sawhorses there. Use a square, make sure this angle is a right angle before you tighten everything down. And then we're going to do the other 2 legs of the short side right on top of this one before we stand everything up. To stand this up safely, you want to have a couple pieces of scrap lumber and a clamp that can span, I think, 10 or 12 inches. You see I'm clamping the boards onto there. Do the same thing on the other side. Then you can safely work on these. And once you get the 3 sides up like this, you can take this bracing down because it's going to hold itself up at that point. Now we're checking the structure for square, and to do that you check the diagonal dimensions, and if they match, then the structure is square. In this case, the landscaper did a great job of putting concrete footers where they need to be. To get the bolts through these 3 boards and tighten them down, you might need a clamp. Some clamps come with this kit. They're not very good, but they might be good enough to squeeze these boards together. In this case, we didn't really have to do too much of that, but if your surface is not completely level, that could cause gaps here. And here's a trick with the clamp as well. To clamp the 2 corners of the roof panels together, that can help some of those holes on the inside line up better as well. Here I'm getting ready to slide up. There's a seam cover that goes up the 4 corners of this, 1 seam cover between each panel. That keeps the rain out. It's like a little ridge cap. And then this decorative trim goes around the perimeter, covers up the end of the sheet metal, but it's really purely decorative, and actually it's kind of the opposite of functional. Instead of having a drip edge on this to protect that fascia board, this trim goes on top of the sheet metal and hangs down over the fascia board, and it actually can end up trapping leaves and moisture in there and rotting out the fascia board. That's one of the few design flaws I feel like is in this product. You could leave that trim off. It doesn't look quite as pretty, or you could try to install some gutters or something, but there's no overhang with the metal over the fascia board either, so you're kind of limited to your options here, unfortunately. And that's about it for the gazebo itself. Client bought the Mosquito netting add-on. That's what my friend is unboxing over there, and I'm getting ready to put the concrete anchors in. If you have this on a wood deck, you want to make sure it's very sturdy. You could attach it to that with some lag screws. Ideally though, this would be attached to concrete and drilled in with concrete anchors. I like to use wedge anchors to do this. The kit comes with some Tapcons, but I found that those are not very good. Sometimes they twist apart when you're trying to install them. Wedge anchors seem to work pretty good. To put the mosquito netting on, there's a plastic track that goes around the perimeter of it, so we're measuring to make sure it starts in the center here. Getting this track up proved to be a little tricky. There's little pan head screws that go in on the side, and those are straightforward enough, but up from the bottom, inside the track, you're supposed to drive a pan head screw as well. And you can see us here struggling actually. The screw was falling off the bit, and it's just not going very well, but then we figured out a solution. Grab a open-ended wrench and you can open up the track a little bit so that your driving tool can get up in there with the pan head screw on it and put the screw into the wood that way. And we found that that works pretty well, and once we figured that out, we were able to get the track mounted pretty quickly after that. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope these steps help you assemble your own backyard Discovery gazebo, or if you live in the St. Louis area and you don't want to put up with the fuss, I'd be happy to assemble it for you. We can get it done in one day. This project took us about 6 hours. Like I said, we've done many of these. I would imagine for someone doing it for the first time, it would take at least 2 days. That's what it was for me when I first started, for sure. So getittogetherman.com. Look me up if you'd like me to assemble your gazebos or swing sets, furniture, anything that needs put together. We'd be happy to do it. You have a great day.